The Royals drafted Alex Gordon in the summer of 2005. They lost 106 games that summer, and it's hard to overstate how bad they really were. Alex was looked at as the savior by a lot of people. Left-handed hitting, third baseman, blue eyes, kind of shaggy blonde hair, and it was easy for people to make the comparison to George Brett. I was covering the Royals at the time, and I thought that the comparison was ridiculous, and I promised myself that I would never use it in print until George Brett himself said that he was honored by the comparison. And at that point, I felt like there was no choice, really. It was completely unfair for Alex to be, thrown into that situation for so many expectations. But that was the way that it was for him, and he never complained about it. He tried to embrace it as best he could through all the silliness of a error rookie card that came out that was sold for hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars before he even played in the big leagues. His first at-bat in the big leagues, he had a standing ovation. It was his second standing ovation of the day, actually, before he'd ever had a professional at-bat. It came with the bases loaded, and he ended the inning with an out. There was, some symbolism in that, I would say, because the beginning of his career was pretty terrible. He struggled. He struggled a lot defensively. He struggled at the plate. They had to switch positions. They demoted him a few times. And I think the turning point that I think a lot of Royals fans will remember was in September of 2010. And at that point, he was 26 years old. That was the end of his fourth big league season. And by then, a lot of people had just written him off as a complete bust and, kind of given up hope. The Royals were out of ideas in some ways, and they moved him to left field from third base, just betting on his athleticism. And, they basically had no other option. They didn't know what else to do, and they thought that maybe moving him to left field would clear his brain and allow him to be a good player. And in September of that year, I'll never forget, he told Bob Dutton, who was our beat writer at the time, that he planned on dominating the next year. And Bob's eyes got real wide, and he goes, "Oh, dominate." And he said, "Yeah, dominate." And I think Bob even went back to Alex, later on in that day and said, "You know how this is going to read? I just want to make sure you want to say dominate." And Alex said, "Yes, I mean dominate." In 2010, he hit 215 with a 315 on base percentage and a 355 slugging percentage. That same guy, after saying that he would dominate the next year, hit 303 with a 376 on base and a 502 slugging percentage. He even got some MVP votes that year. It was still his best offensive season. It was a breakout in so many ways. He didn't make the All-Star game that year just because, All-Star voting and All-Star recognition tends to lag a little bit behind actual accomplishment. But he did win a Gold Glove that year, his first year playing left field full-time. And, I think everybody that follows the Royals knows what happens after that. He became, really the symbol of the Royals' rise from the absolute rubble of Major League Baseball, first to competitiveness, then to a winning season in 2013, then the postseason in 2014, and a world championship in 2015. He is going to have, I don't think there's any doubt that he'll be inducted into the Royals Hall of Fame someday. He has a chance, depending on what happens this winter, and the years after that, I think he has a legitimate chance to have his number retired. He is, in some ways, I don't think that he's ever going to be the next George Brett, and that's a completely unfair label to put on anybody. But I do think that in a lot of ways, he is the best Royals player since George Brett, the best position player since George Brett. I know there's an argument to be made for Carlos Beltran, but I think if you look at some of the advanced numbers, wins above replacement and some other things, he's had both a higher peak with the Royals than Beltran did, and certainly a longer and more distinguished career. So it's a heck of a ride, and I think that there's just a really beautiful symmetry between Alex's determination, kind of legendary, at least locally legendary, hard work, very humble, but yet very confident. rise from, a nobody, a bust, really, to one of the best players in all of baseball. So no matter what happens this offseason, Alex Gordon will be remembered as one of the best Royals players of all time. The Royals caravan one year, and I wish I could remember which winter it was, but it went through Nebraska, and obviously this was the Alex Gordon show. And I remember we stopped at a sports bar there in Lincoln, and the line was out the door by the time the bus pulled up. I think people waited, literally hours to meet Alex, to shake his hand, to get something signed by him. And I sat next to him through that whole thing for the story I was doing. And it was remarkable to me how many people came up to him and said, I remember you in Little League at, and then name the field. I played against your brother at, and they named the high school. I remember watching you in the high school, sectional playoffs or whatever. And everybody there had, such a personal connection to him. It was, I'll never forget that it was probably 5 years ago. And I still remember that. I remember afterward, and he signed about half hour longer than he was supposed to. And afterward, he just said, I gotta pee. And he just got up and he rushed into the bathroom. And later on, he told me that somebody followed him in there. And he's doing his thing there in the bathroom, and some guy comes in. He's like, "Hey, Alex, can you sign this for me?" And he just says, "Can I finish peeing?" And he walked out of the door. And sure enough, Alex has always been, at least in my experience, and I've never heard stories that say otherwise, just unfailingly polite and respectful. And I think that that's one of the things that makes him, if you took a poll in the Royals organization of their favorite player, the only person I think that would give Alex a run for his money would be Salvador Perez. If you just said, who's your favorite Royals player? And I'm talking about the scouts, the executives, the coaches, all of that. It would be one of those two, I'm almost sure. And, I think that if you took a poll amongst Royals fans, it would probably be kind of the same way. And I think that what Royals fans are always going to remember about Alex, no matter how the rest of this goes, is, how hard he works, the shape that he keeps himself in. I've always thought if this baseball thing doesn't work out, he could model for Men's Health. He can remember the last time he ate a piece of cake, the last time he had a Coke, things like that. And it's a long time ago too, by the way. So I think people respect that. They respect the dedication that he's shown to baseball. I think they especially respect the way that he never complained when things were going against him. He'd always mention, we're paid a lot of money to play this game, and some of the negative comments, some of the criticisms that you hear, that's just part of it. And there's a real bond, I think that he built with Kansas City for a long time. I believe he has his off-season home in Nebraska now, but for a long time he lived here in Kansas City in Overland Park, and met a lot of people and made a lot of connections and earned a lot of respect. And it doesn't always happen this way, that a guy's drafted with a terrible team and builds his way up to individual stardom and then team success in really the ultimate way. So he'll never be forgotten in Kansas City, no matter what happens the rest of this way. Alex signed a contract extension in the spring of 2012 with the Royals. And, looking back on it now, we can all see that it was well below market value. And he took a lot less money to stay in Kansas City long term. But at the time, there was some risk on the Royals side. Alex had just had the one good season in 2011. And, no matter what anybody says right now, there was some disagreement within the industry about which was the real Alex Gordon. Was it the 4 years before 2011 when he really struggled and struck out way too much and couldn't get on base and struggled defensively, or was it 2011 when he was legitimately one of the best players in all of baseball? And the thing that I remember about that spring, everybody knew the Royals talked openly. They didn't exchange numbers or anything, but they talked openly about, yes, we are trying to sign Alex. And Alex, talked about, this is a place that I'm very comfortable, but, baseball's a business and stuff like that. And, then in the spring, and it was the last week of spring training, and it may have even been the last day that the Royals were in Surprise, but I know it was way toward the end of spring training. And, they finally got the deal done, and they had the press conference, and Alex is, very, I don't want to say he's not quiet. People say he's quiet sometimes. And I think that gives off the wrong impression. He doesn't talk a lot, but he's not shy. He's kind of a man of no wasted words. And one of the things I remember, in that press conference was, him saying, basically, I told Casey, his agent is Casey Close. I told Casey that whatever deal the Royals got, you work and you get the best deal possible, but no matter whatever the Royals' final offer is, I'm going to sign that. And he said that, and I remember Dayton, I think, just said, "Well, I wish we would have known that." When we were going through the negotiations, but he definitely took less money to stay in Kansas City, and people here, I think, are always going to be grateful for that. And, it kind of sets up now, his first free agency. He could have been a free agent a few years ago. But now this kind of weird situation where, I think that if all other things were equal, he probably would stay in Kansas City. If this was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when the Royals could offer as much or almost as much money as anybody else, maybe he would stay in Kansas City. But, baseball is very much a business. The Royals are a business. All of these players are individual businesses. And I think that, there's just a financial reality that I think most fans understand, but can be frustrating when you see a guy that has spent his whole career and, just kind of the financial realities of baseball, may or may not be pushing him outside of Kansas City. When people close their eyes and think about Alex Gordon, I think they're going to remember two things in particular. One of them is all the times that he's crashed into the wall making a catch in the outfield. There was a catch early in the season in Chicago where he ended up in the second or third row of the stands making a catch. And, I watched that highlight so many times. And, I just remember Ryan Lefevre when he's on the call, he says, "No way," when, Alex comes up with the ball. Rustin Dodd wrote a really cool story after that catch, too. There was a guy in the stands that took this beautiful picture of Alex just with his back on the concrete floor of U.S. Cellular Field and a White Sox fan right there. And it's a very beautiful picture. And the other catch was I think it was the ALCS last year against Baltimore. And he made a catch sprinting away from the plate into the wall, made the catch, crushed the wall, came down on the ground. And, you just knew at that point, you'd seen that so many times, you knew he had the catch, you knew he was fine. And I remember just thinking, I hope the wall's okay. And, I think people also remember him joking earlier this season in 2015 about, one of his sons, kind of not makes fun of him, but like does the Alex Gordon. He says, "Alex Gordon to the wall," and bounces off the wall of his house and just lays there for 3 or 4 seconds. And, with the drama building, did he catch it? Did he not? And the other moment, though, the other like on-field thing that I think people will never forget is the home run in Game 1 of the World Series against Familia. That really, if you think about it, and who knows, the Royals were better than the Mets in a lot of ways, and they were the better team, and probably maybe they would have won anyway. But if he doesn't hit that home run in the bottom of the ninth, and if the Mets win Game 1 in Kansas City, and what everybody remembers about that game is Eric Hosmer's error and the Royals losing home field advantage right away in the World Series. I mean, who knows how the rest of that goes? Maybe it just means the Royals would have won in 6 instead of 5. But there's a lot of people that were involved in both sides of the World Series, by the way, who think that, that absolutely changed the rest of the series and was an enormous reason why the Royals won that. So, he has, sort of the same way that people remember 1985 Game 3 of the ALCS, which most people around Kansas City and with the Royals just refer to as the George Brett game. Went 4 for 4, scored 4 runs, hit 2 home runs, had 3 RBIs, and made what George himself and a lot of other people have called the best defensive play of his career. I think people, in the same way they remember that, they're going to remember Alex's home run in the bottom of the ninth of Game 1 of the 2015 World Series. That's a hard home run to hit too, against a sinker baller, to get the ball in the air like that, way over the center field fence at Kauffman Stadium. And then, of course, the Royals ended up winning the game in 14 innings on Eric Hosmer's sacrifice fly, and I think he probably holds the unofficial record for the biggest bat flip off a RBI sac fly in the history of baseball, and really set a tone for the World Series, and a moment that I think people will never